Royal shockwaves erupt tonight as Prince Harry is reportedly in tears after Samantha Markle unveils what she claims are explosive DNA results tied to Meghan's past. Sources say Harry was completely blindsided, his voice shaking, eyes red as whispers of betrayal ripple through private circles. But was it a hidden chapter from 1997, a sealed record finally exposed? Or a family secret rewritten by science? Meghan is said to be furious. Samantha unflinching. And the truth may change everything. What exactly did that DNA test reveal? The moment the evidence surfaced, at the center of the storm is not a rumor, not a blurry photograph, not an anonymous source, but a claim of DNA evidence. According to Samantha Markle, the long-whispered mystery surrounding 1997 is no longer just speculation buried in online forums. She alleges that genetic testing has produced results directly tied to that year, the same year repeatedly described as a missing piece in Meghan Markle's timeline. For years, critics pointed to 1997 as an unexplained gap. Now, Samantha insists science has stepped into the argument. The claim is explosive that genetic markers allegedly link Meghan to a child who has been the subject of persistent speculation. Samantha has not framed this as gossip or theory. Instead, she presents it as documentation, lab results, biological data, something measurable and verifiable. In her telling, this is no longer about family drama. It is about DNA. And DNA, unlike memory or narrative, does not adjust itself to public image. What makes this moment so intense is the reported reaction from Prince Harry. Sources close to the situation suggests that when he was shown the alleged documentation, it was the first time he had seen anything of this nature. No prepared statement, no polished explanation, just papers placed in front of him detailing genetic connections tied to 1997. The same 1997 that later became controversial when records connected to Rachel Meghan Markle were said to be sealed in December 2018, 7 months after the royal wedding in May 2018. Harry, described as visibly shaken, was reportedly overwhelmed. Not angry at first, just stunned. The kind of silence that fills a room when something does not make sense. Those who claim to have insight into the moment describe disbelief followed by emotion, tears, questions, a feeling of being blindsided. If the allegations are false, the shock would still be devastating. If there is truth behind them, the implications are even heavier. Certainly, after the pandemic and everything else, we crave that. We crave being able to go high and like. Samantha's position appears calculated. She has moved away from emotional accusations and toward what she calls proof. By invoking DNA testing, she shifts the conversation from opinion to biology. This is not about conflicting interviews or tabloid headlines. It is about genetic matches, and that distinction matters. In a world where narratives can be shaped, DNA stands apart as something difficult to manipulate. The weight of this development lies in what it suggests. If genetic results connect Meghan to events tied to 1997, why did that year become so controversial later? Why were records allegedly sealed in December 2018 after her marriage to Prince Harry? And most importantly, what exactly did Harry know before that moment? Those close to him suggest the pain was not only about the claim itself but about timing, about trust, about whether the full story had been shared. Because if science has entered the discussion, then the conversation changes entirely. It is no longer about who said what in an interview. It becomes about evidence. And as alleged documents quietly circulate, a heavier question eclipses headlines. What did the DNA prove? And who feared its revelation? Stay glued. The story he believed. If the first shock was the sight of alleged DNA documentation, the second wave was far more personal because this was no longer about laboratory results alone. It was about the story Prince Harry had been told, the version of events he had trusted when he chose to marry Meghan Markle in May 2018 and build a life with her under the global spotlight. From the beginning, Meghan's public narrative had been clear and consistent. A self-made woman navigating Hollywood on her own terms, overcoming family tension and stepping into royal life with honesty and strength. That origin story was powerful. It was repeated in interviews, speeches, and media coverage. It was the foundation of the brand built around authenticity and transparency. And, according to those who follow this closely, because it feels really inclusive and there's representation and it's just like a sweet love story. It was the story Harry believed when he defended her publicly and distanced himself from critics, including Samantha Markle. But Samantha has long argued that the public version of Meghan's past was incomplete. Not entirely fabricated, she suggests, but edited, smoothed, certain chapters shortened, others left unexplained. And at the center of her claims is that same year that refuses to disappear, 1997. A year that investigators online describe as a gap, a year allegedly connected to birth records under the name Rachel Meghan Markle. A year that later became more controversial when reports surfaced that records tied to that name were sealed in December 2018. The timing of that seal has fueled suspicion. December 2018 was 7 months after the royal wedding. Meghan was fully integrated into the royal family. The world's attention was fixed on the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. So why, critics ask, would documents connected to 1997 become inaccessible more than 2 decades later? And only after marrying into royalty? Records are sealed for many legal reasons. And so, well, a 5-week study program is not, that doesn't equate with working at the embassy. But the sequence of events has become part of the larger narrative Samantha is pushing. For Harry, the emotional weight lies in the possibility that decisions of enormous consequence were made based on a particular understanding of the past. Marriage into the British royal family is not a small step. It carries constitutional implications, public responsibility, and historic significance. If any part of Meghan's history, especially something as serious as events tied to 1997, was not fully disclosed, the question becomes less about scandal and more about trust. Samantha's claim that DNA results now point back to that same year intensifies the contrast. On one side is the story Harry believed. On the other is what biological evidence allegedly suggests. If the two do not align, the tension is unavoidable. DNA does not operate on perception. It does not respond to public relations strategies or carefully worded interviews. It simply reflects biological reality. Those close to the situation describe Harry as struggling, not only with the claim itself, but with what it means for the foundation of his marriage. Because if he defended Meghan against family accusations for years, standing firm against Samantha's earlier warnings, what happens if science appears to validate the very concerns he once dismissed? I think you feel really confident that it was divinely ordered. Maybe all of this, our friendship, you becoming art. And as attention circles back once again to 1997 and the December 2018 sealing of records, the divide between narrative and evidence grows sharper, raising a deeper, more unsettling possibility that the truth may not lie in what was said, but in what was left unsaid. Now, what happens when sealed records and fading memories collide, suddenly revealing that the loudest truths may hide in silence? Keep watching the file that refuses to stay buried. By now, the conversation keeps circling back to one stubborn point, 1997. Not because of gossip, but because of paperwork. Online, researchers digging through public databases years ago claimed they located a birth entry under the name Rachel Meghan Markle for that year in California. On its own, that discovery might have faded into obscurity, but it didn't, because access to related records later became restricted. Reports began circulating that in December 2018, certain documents connected to that name were sealed. The timing immediately drew attention. Meghan had married Prince Harry in May 2018. She was firmly inside the royal structure. Public interest in her background was intense. And then, suddenly files tied to a decades-old entry were no longer easily accessible. That sequence of events transformed a quiet administrative detail into a lightning rod. Internet investigators went to work. Some wrote directly to California record offices. Others compared database snapshots, forums filled with screenshots, timestamps, and conflicting interpretations. Was the entry routine? Was it misfiled? Was it connected to someone else with a similar name? The more people searched, the less clarity they seemed to find. What remained constant was the question: why did this particular year carry so much weight? Samantha Markle has now placed that same year at the center of her latest claim. According to her, the alleged DNA results don't just suggest a vague family connection. She ties them directly to 1997. 40 friends to donate 40 minutes of their time to help mentor a woman who's mobilizing back into the workforce. In her framing, the genetic evidence aligns with the sealed documentation. The implication is not subtle. She is effectively arguing that biology and paperwork point to the same moment in time. That alignment is what changes the tone of the debate. Before, critics were working with timelines and speculation. Now Samantha suggests there is a scientific component reinforcing the Paper trail. Whether the claim holds or not, it intensifies scrutiny. If a birth record exists and genetic testing connects Meghan to a child from that period, the significance of the seal becomes harder to ignore. Supporters argue that records are sealed for many legitimate reasons such as privacy, clerical corrections, and legal protections. Public figures often take steps to guard personal information. But critics frame it differently. They question whether the restriction was preventative, a normal legal measure, or reactive, an attempt to contain potential fallout once Meghan became a global figure. Prince Harry's reported emotional reaction adds urgency to this question. If he had never examined these details closely before, the sudden convergence of a sealed record and alleged DNA data would feel overwhelming. The issue stops being abstract. It becomes personal. It forces him to revisit conversations, reassess timelines, and confront the possibility that a chapter of the past was more complex than he understood. And so the spotlight remains fixed on that single year. Not because it is dramatic on its own, but because every new development, every claim, every document, every whisper of laboratory confirmation leads straight back to it, tightening the focus and raising a sharper, more uncomfortable possibility that the seal was not the end of the story, but the beginning of something far more consequential. So, how did one quiet year become origin of whispers, documents, and laboratory claims, suggesting the sealed truth was beginning? Stay with us. A question no one can ignore.